if they were genuine enough, our national officials, they will have informed us early enough that today there will be a meeting that will be done between the union and the Teacher Service Commission, so that we inform our teachers early in the morning that there is a meeting and we expect something to be coming out of that meeting.
Many are the issues that they thought maybe TSC was going to sit down and listen. We thought we were going to get a better deal, and by yesterday we were shocked after the demonstrations. We got from the media that the strike has been called off. Actually, it's not about calling off the strike, but it is about what is the Kenyan teacher, what is Kericho teacher getting from the strike that we went.
So teachers are asking, why were we asking them to join us in the demonstrations when this was not part of the agenda? TSC has not given any number on how many teachers they intend to promote. That document says they will promote teachers as and when funds are available. So what was the difference between the current situation and the former situation?
So what 2-week session it has been in the country, Jamila, particularly in the education sector. Maybe the question is who is not on strike or calling for one, but I'll ask the nice question. What's happening?
Unajua Waswahili wasema kuna misuko-suko. Kuna matatizo in the education sector, Yvonne. As we are aware, the teachers' unions, NAT and KUPPET, had called for a strike. Of course, to all their teachers not to report to school. Schools are opening for the third term, very crucial term. Of course, you have exams happening this year. And of course, what has been needed in the education sector has been some sort of stability, primary and high school, and of course, going on to the university. We'll talk about the university funding and the crisis that is also there. But of course, what parents and students and teachers actually were expecting is that there'll be some sort of normalcy in the education sector. Remember, since the COVID-19 pandemic, it took over 2 years for us to actually come back to a normal education calendar from January this year.
Then remember floods?
And remember
earlier
the floods.
This year
There was an interruption in schools. And then, of course, the CBC has had its own fair share of problems which have not been sorted out. There are some education stakeholders who are saying we should not have rushed into this. We should have prepared ourselves better. Before we go into this, the JSS teachers, the lack of teachers, them being there, permanent and pensionable, on contract. And what this means in schools, there are students who have not really gotten quality education because of not having those crucial JSS teachers. With all this happening, and then, of course, the strike is called by NAT and KUPPET, and then a day before the strike is supposed to kick off, of course, NAT pulls out and says, we're not going into this. I think there's been some agreement of sorts with the government. We ask our teachers to go to school. But then now KUPPET also refused and said the issues have not been sorted. And you know, in the beginning, maybe the belief had been this strike will not really shikakasi, as we say it in Kiswahili, because KUPPET imejiondoa, and of course KUPPET is seen as the bigger brother, or the one that's been there for a longer time than KUPPET.
Not than KUPPET.
Not. But then now we have the strike, KUPPET, and we saw a lot of demonstrations across the country, Yvonne. We saw education being paralyzed in most of secondary schools. Teachers walikataa kabisa. Of course, there were some students in school, but they were not really getting anything. And then we have them going home. Some schools were actually closed. On Monday. Right. I think there were 8 schools in Makueni, a few in Nakuru, and then we went around and saw wanafunzi wanaenda nyumbani. And then that same Monday, and we were saying, kuna wale wanafunzi wamefika nyumbani, wale wako njiani, mzazi amelipa fare, and then KUPPET calls off the strike. And then now, of course, what the soundbite we're listening to, some teachers saying, no, what we wanted, haijapatikana.
I'd like us to listen to KUPPET, then the Secretary General, if we can listen to that first soundbite, calling off the strike. And this was after talks that they had with Nancy Macharia, the CEO of the Teachers Service Commission.
In compliance with the court order which was instituted and which is coming up on 5th, that is Thursday. From the union side, we suspend the strike and ask all our teachers to go back to class pending the speedy resolutions of these matters as already agreed upon between us and the Commission.
Happy to report to the nation that we have reached an amicable settlement which will enable our teachers resume duty immediately. As promised on August 21st, 2021, the Commission is today pleased to confirm that the government provided funds for the implementation of the second phase of the CBA with effect from the 1st July 2024, and all our teachers have benefited from the same together with the arrears.
This was not received well, Yvonne, by teachers, and we heard some of them in the beginning saying, well, what are we benefiting from this? Ni kama wamekubaliana kule juu, and hapa chini the issues that we really went on strike about have not been addressed. And I think we'll continue and listen to what Akelo Misori said when he was asked about now the divide that was clearly being seen, the cracks that are emerging within KUPPET itself, in terms of whether this suspension of the strike was really for the benefit of the teachers, because there were some claims that walilazimishwa. The discussions that went on. Remember, there was a press conference that was supposed to happen, I think, at 2 o'clock by TSC and KUPPET, which ended up happening about 3-4 hours later. There were claims that wenda watu walilazimishwa. I think maybe we should listen to what Akelo Misori talks about showing leadership.
Yeah. I must show leadership, because in leadership, a bad decision, as in the eyes of many members, is better than no decision. So if I switch off my phone and decide to run away, I have not shown leadership yet. It is me who is mandated. Not everybody has the authority to even issue a strike notice.
And Yvonne and Linus and Gituku, that authority was being questioned by teachers, and they're saying, well, maybe we need to look at our constitution and see tuondole mamlaka ya Secretary General to be able to call off a strike, because wamekataa, hawajakubaliana na Yvonne. And as I finish, you talk about how the education sector is in trouble, is in a crisis. Today, we'll talk about university students, but I just wanted to paint a picture of how bad things are. University student representatives from MKU, Moi University, Dedan Kimathi, JKUAT, and University of Nairobi have given a 24-hour notice to go on strike over the funding model. Lecturers have vowed to paralyze learning. 4 unions have threatened to down their tools over payment. They're saying that hawajalipwa and they're going to paralyze masomo. And we talked about all the other challenges that are facing the education sector. So tunaangalia kuanzia primary all the way to university. Kuna shida kwenye manyata ya education. Yeah.
You know, when you're looking at the decision that was taken by KUPPET, on Sunday they had just spoken to restate that they're actually on strike. And that is why on Monday some schools decided to send their students home because nothing was happening. It was becoming increasingly dangerous for learners to remain in school because some were starting to riot. Of course, what do you do when you have nothing to do? You have no teachers attending to you, no one to guide you on what you're supposed to be doing. But then again, when you look at the decision that was taken by KUPPET, there are questions that arise because nothing particularly changed. As early as last week, the Teacher Service Commission had given signal that the second phase of the CBA of 2021-2025 was going to be implemented in the salaries of the teachers for the month of July and for the month of August. And of course, we remember that we are doing that story of looking at what that increment is, which is between slightly over 1,000 and slightly over 3,000 shillings. So that had already been implemented. That is what the Teacher Service Commission had done. And even as they were doing that, there was already a court order directing both unions of teachers, that is KUPPET and NAT, to stop that strike. So KUPPET had stayed on and said that they are going on strike, that the court order is time-barred, and therefore that they were going to continue fighting for their rights. And they were saying that their rights are not just about the implementation of the second phase of the CBA, but also the questions of, that is not just on the second phase of the CBA as far as the salaries are concerned, but there are the questions of promotion of those that have stagnated over several years. But when KUPPET is coming to call the strike, nothing changes. The court order was still existent, but they said that we are now respecting the court order. I mean, it puts to question on questions of principle, because if indeed that you're persuaded that you will not respect the court order, then you all of a sudden decide to support it, I think the members of KUPPET have legitimate questions that they are raising. But at the same time, you're looking at a sector that has continued to struggle with all these questions. Remember, it's just about 2 weeks ago that John Mbadi sat in this studio and stated that there were no resources to convert the JSS interns into permanent and pensionable teachers. And that also appeared to have fueled that strike because as he was giving those statements, the teachers are preparing to go on strike, and now they had more reason to go on strike because he said there are no resources.
Yeah.
Only for him to come and revise his statement and say that what he meant is that not now, but from January to be possible to really convert the intern teachers into permanent and pensionable. But if you have to look at the management of that entire sector, there are questions that need to be answered, and there's streamlining that needs to be done. And I don't know whether at this point in time, the Teacher Service Commission and the unions are well aware of what exactly to do with all those grievances that have been raised in the past few weeks and days.
Yeah, and I mean, just that confusion that continues to reign. You have teachers in CIS saying, you know, no, this is not what we bargained for, this is not what we asked for, and we haven't received that. Akelo Misori saying, you know, we've gotten the CBA implemented, and in fact, we have a quote, commitment on the employment of JSS teachers, which is something that has been, you know, an issue. Linus, because, you know, of time, give us your perspective on this, because we now also want to move into the university funding model, which is an entire mess altogether. Some supposedly scientific testing method that has caused, I mean, usually, but anyway, science is always a matter of debate, but it does not seem to have, I think as Emmanuel Manyasa said with you, that is the one thing I took away from the conversation that you had at Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. Emmanuel Manyasa says that metric testing system was not itself subjected, the means testing system was not itself subjected to any testing. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a conversation that has been had for weeks now. But what do we hear from government? Oh, you know, possibly students or learners entered the wrong details. Oh, you can appeal. We hear the president who says, no, universities should accept everyone, regardless of whether they have started to pay or not. We will fix those problems as we go forward. Linus.
Yes, and I know we'll come to that issue of the controversies around funding, the funding model for education. But just on the strikes issue, I think it's a very, very unfortunate time for students and parents because there's this air of instability in the education sector. Because even now, as we talk of KUPPET calling off the strike, we still have branches saying, no, we don't agree with the decision by the national leadership. And what that does is it destabilizes the environment, especially for learners. It's also notable that we haven't seen a lot of political leadership around this issue. We are yet to see our new CS for education, unless I missed this. That is Julius Ogamba Migos is yet to add his voice to this discussion.
Linus, he spoke once in the beginning, and it was at the sidelines of some other meeting in Naivasha, and that was it. He's been silent for, I think, 2 weeks now. Yeah. And well, this is normally, and we've had many strikes. It's normally a direct test of the leadership at the Ministry of Education, and that is from top down. I know, we've seen TSC engaging the unions, but ultimately the pass holder is not TSC, but the national government, which is why the voice of the Ministry of Education is going to be very, very key. Now, as we begin just to look at this new funding model, we can already pick one thing, and I could pick it just by watching Sam's town hall in
in Juja the other day, and that is the shocking absence of consultations in this whole process. Where is this model housed at? Who is the owner of the new funding model, the thinking? Where is the team? And I think what we've seen in the last few weeks is the president taking the lead as the prime advocate of the new model, complete with a town hall at the KICC to engage university students and explain the model. Much as we've seen the different explanations, I don't know, and Sam will tell us from his experience at Juja, whether there was any light, or just more heat into the issue. Because for me, I picked more heat. It still hasn't appeared to me that we have a well-thought-out funding model that will actually achieve the objectives that the government is pushing, which is access to university education for all. Otherwise, right now, it's sounding like a major shouting match.
It is, and the government isn't winning. Sam?
Yeah, well, first I have to say that it was quite shocking to see that some of the government officials, there are several questions they are unable to answer because they've had time to process this. To the extent that you've implemented it, sent out letters, then recalled the letters so that you can correct the problem, now sent out the letters, received appeals, and you're told that now they stand at 12,000. I thought the president had said that the appeals were about 26,000 when he spoke to the nation from the KICC. But still to date, there are still things that are unclear. If you're talking about the means testing instrument, the components of it, and how that plays out when you're considering different students who come from different households, those that have work, those that don't have work, and the insistence that there is data from KRA and the government has a lot of data. Just saying that the government has has access to a lot of data is not sufficient, because at the end of the day, you're dealing with real human beings, real students that you want to consider their particular details as outlined in whatever they own. I'm sure you have a clip, number 9.
Because I want us to hear exactly what you're saying about real people.
It's in a band that I don't know whether my parents will afford that. Because if you look at even there's no particular job that my parents are doing. Because if you could see, I have my mom. My mom is also sick. My dad is just doing this. We call it in our language amal. Anafanya hapo.
Iko juu sana. Kwa sababu familia yetu iko chini, kwa mzee ana kazi.
All right, we'll listen to another one, number 11, so that we can also get the full context about some of these learners and what exactly they are talking about, their families. Listen.
We have appealed, lakini feedback haichapata. Sasa tulikuwa tunataka serikali ione sana ndio hii maneno yaharakishwe.
Yeah, so hii maneno yaharakishwe so that, because they have already reported to school, and I interacted with some of them the first years at JKUAT and other universities, and you just sympathize with them that they're in school but they're not sure of what's going to happen. Of course, the ministry has given instructions that every learner that comes, whether they have paid school fees or not, has to be admitted. But also the university chancellors, vice chancellors are telling you that at the end of the semester, they are not going to be allowed to sit examinations if they'll not have cleared the fees. What is the possibility that in the next 3 or so months, when the semester is concluding, a family that is lacking, say,
like that Derek cost that we had,
between 30,000 and say 70,000 or thereabout, what is the chance that they are going to have those resources if already they are not even able to pay for the entry minimum, the fees that they're supposed to be paying. So I picked a couple of issues that I think the ministry needs to clear, especially that on that particular instrument, because it is not possible that you have done a thorough job, yet you're receiving feedback in thousands of people saying that you put me in the wrong band, and also an appreciation of, even if you receive more than 70,000 shillings as income, what do you do with it? Because people do not live and work for the sake of paying school fees. There's so many things that have to be funded in a family setup. Again, on the question of even the HELB officials trying to explain this particular question of what needs to be done, that was quite disappointing. There's a question that I posed to the representative from HELB about the burden that comes to the students. At the moment, the highest burden that a learner who goes to the university would have before this new model, it was going to be 360,000 shillings. With the new model, that will go up. If you're studying medicine, it will go up to 1.4 million shillings by the end of your 6 years. Wow. For the cheapest, it could go up to 600,000 shillings. When I asked about the repayment, what do you call it? The repayment trends. He was talking about some 5.2 billion shillings is recovered every year, but also talking about some 72% recovery success, meaning that 72% of loanees are servicing or are paying back. This year, they're spending 28 billion shillings to give out to the loanees. They are collecting 5.2 billion shillings as recovery. What are the odds that as you progress, you'll have this 28 coming in and 28 going out? If that doesn't happen, then HELB is going to be crippled in the next few years. We can give it 4 years so that the first cohort can clear school. But within 4 years, unless something is done, HELB will not have a sustainable business model, because they'll be releasing loans that never come back. And this is because of the particular reason that at the moment you're talking about increasing unemployment trends in the country. That people are clearing the university, they do not have a job for several years, and when they get one, it's just sufficient to just manage a few items within their livelihoods. So they are going to, what do you call it? When you default, yes, they're going to default some of these loans, and HELB will suffer in the process. Finally, this model is said that it came so that it can help universities that were collapsing. They were going insolvent. They say up to 23 universities as of last year were almost insolvent. That this model is now helping them to get away from that window of insolvency.
What about the students then?
That within 3 to 4 years, the universities will have recovered. Again, as you ask, what about the students who are not able to pay? So you want to have them suffer so much to conduct Harambes, to take loans from HELB, which come at a cost, obviously, and that's a cost that you come into their lives for the next 18 to 25 years to save universities, but their lives will continue to suffer. The representative from HELB said that at the moment, if you lend if you lend out 100 shillings, you recover it when it is 14 shillings. When you recover it, meaning that they're only recovering 14% of their loans in terms of value, based on the time value of money. If this is the trend, then this business is not sustainable.
And as you try to serve universities that are in trouble, Yvonne, we need to go back a bit into the 90s and ask ourselves, how did we find ourselves here? During that time, there was a whole the whole process of trying to overhaul university funding. And during that time, there was a lot of privatization of universities, but also they were trying to get public universities to start raising revenue. And then now, so when state universities became largely privately funded at the time, but the government support was as a form of cost sharing. Students were paying some subsidized tuition fee, and then there was also a bursary scheme for those students who were unable to pay. But then at the same time, Yvonne, I think we talked about this, some government universities were allowed to admit privately sponsored students, and then these students pay the full cost of the university program. I remember when we were studying journalism, we had to pay the full cost. And I think at the height of this, it was around, I think, 2011, 2012, public university revenues from private sources were exceeding what the government was funding. And then, of course, universities are also expected to engage in some entrepreneurial activities so that you can supplement the state funding, and private universities were authorized, actually, to expand in a move to try and expand higher education opportunities. What did this mean, Yvonne? It means that the whole system ballooned as a result. The universities ikawa nyingi. In the year 2000, there were 18 universities. By 2010, there were 60 universities. By 2023, there were 69. And then now student enrollment also went up from about 45,000 students in the year 2000 to over 500,000 currently. On the flip side of this now, it meant some of those entrepreneurial activities that universities were supposed to engage in did not really produce revenue. And then now, you know, this growth of privately sponsored students did not really keep up. And at some point, some of these public universities were left in financial distress. Remember, quality now became an issue. We had overcrowding in libraries. We had laboratories overcrowding. Classrooms were not, had too many students. We had issues about the teaching environment. Facilities were poorly maintained. And then in 2015, the government decided to close some of the satellite campuses at public universities. And then there was also a moratorium on new campuses. So, mambo yakaanza kuharibika at that point. So we had all this happening at the same time. And then now quality went down because there was not enough money coming in to be able to sustain the large number of students that you're having at the universities. And as Gituku said, the model now is to save these universities at the expense of students. And as I finish, we were listening to students from Kisii, students from Rongo, students from University of Nairobi, students from Eldoret, students from Thika. So this is a problem that is across. You cannot say, wale ambao wanalalamika ni wachache, that the majority of students found themselves in the right bands. Right. It's the other way around. A majority of students did not find themselves in the right bands. And the fear that they have is hawataweza kumaliza masomo yao.
Yeah, now if all of this is to make universities more of a going concern, then shouldn't we also perhaps be looking at just how those universities are being run? You know, is the money going where it should? Is it being utilized properly? Remember, universities have actually been cited in many of those documents by the IMF as part of the conditions, talking about how those are technically insolvent, a good number of them. And so the issue is, even if you give them more money, you know, through this now new funding model where government is saying, okay, you know what, we've got to cost share. This cannot just be government highly subsidizing this. Shouldn't we also be discussing those operations and what is really happening there? Because even if you give them more money through this new funding model, and there is a hole there, you know, a bottomless pit where the money keeps going and is not being utilized properly, then are we really solving the problem? Again, the issue of good money going after bad, just like we talked about a little earlier with SGR. And so, you know, that's where we find ourselves. Linus, final words before we close?
Yeah, I still go back to my point, which is who is midwifing this process? Because we should remember that when President Ruto came to office, one of the first things he did was to form the Munavu committee. Yeah. Was it called the Presidential Working Party? That was supposed to look at comprehensive changes to comprehensive issues around the education. There was CBC, and indeed there is higher learning, that is universities. And after submitting its report, I think, which is part of what we are now going through, we seem to lack what initiatives like this ought to have, which is a transitional phase. In fact, I think on this funding issue, we are running into the same issues that we ran into with CBC, which are transitional challenges. How they'll play out is still really a question of time. We can only see that there's already a lot of chaos, and there are already a lot of students that are not happy with the arrangement. And you can see, I mean, from the people that are talking, that there isn't really the relief. This is not the relief they are looking for, because they have not felt it. The bands sound good, but mambo kwa ground ni different. Yeah. The poor people who the president spoke very passionately about in his KICC town hall are not really feeling that this is their avenue.
Yeah, and speaking of that, just, you know, as a quick one, as we close, Dennis Itumbi sends a message and says, it is not true. The means testing instrument is in its second year. It has not only been tested, but has been implemented for 2 consecutive years.
You know, that's interesting. So the means testing instrument is in its second year. But the president said it has existed since, which year? Which was that? I think he said 87. When there was still a form of facility of financing.
Yeah.
Well, it's been there for many years, but what changed in 2024?
Because it's obviously not working.
Yeah.
Exactly, it's not working.
As it should.
The sort of reaction that we've had from the main stakeholders, parents and students, something must have gone wrong.
Yeah.
And it cannot be forgotten here that it is because the government refused to remit resources to the universities that universities started running low on cash and unable to provide the services that they should have. When you had the Vice-Chancellor of JKUAT saying that the release of resources to the universities declined from 80% to below 40%, that is purely the fault of the national government. They did not send resources to the universities. So in as much as they're coming up with a model to ensure that universities now all of a sudden have resources, they must also own up that it was the government. Even if they talk about the fiscal space shrinking, there has to be reality being faced here. Again, there has been a lot of changes with this thing. So who owns it? Is it HELB? Is it the Minister of Higher Education? The Department of Higher Education under the Minister of Education? Is it the President? Is it the government? Is it the cabinet? Who?
Whose skunk is it?
Well, you said it. Because also, Parliament has been asking questions.
Yeah.
We've seen also at HELB, there has been a few changes because the Chief Executive Officer, Charles Ringera, is no longer in office. How did that happen? It wasn't communicated to the public on what exactly is happening there. So I think there are some serious questions that will have to be answered as we progress on. But the bottom line is, the issues of the students have to be resolved sooner rather than later before we can actually lose that generation.
That's right. Okay.
Tufunge kazi.
Yeah.
We start with you, Yvonne. Okay. And today you're asking